difficult to move my arms. I knew it wouldn't be long until the rocket had left the Earth's gravitational pull, and I was in orbit.
Then it all went quiet. It was announced the spaceship has been placed in orbit. Then we heard Yuri's voice. It was difficult to understand. He was just sitting here one minute, and now he's out there, the first man in space.
Земля, космонавт. Космонавт, я Земля. Земля, космонавт. Самочувствие отличное. Продолжаю полет.
And when the portholes opened, he said how beautiful the world is. How beautiful, how wonderful. It's amazing.
The odds for Gagarin surviving the launch had been calculated at just 50-50. Now, as the Vostok settled into a smooth orbit, the Soviet Union prepared to announce its achievement to the world. Three sealed envelopes had been prepared describing three very different outcomes. One announced complete success. The second asked for help in rescuing a cosmonaut who had fallen to Earth outside Russian territory. And the third announced his death.
When it was obvious from the data that Gagarin had made it into orbit, we got the order by telephone from the Kremlin to open envelope number 1 and to announce it on radio, television, and to the news agency TASS.
Moscow calling. Moscow calling. All radio stations are broadcasting this message. This is an official announcement from TASS. The first cosmonaut in the world is in space.
We didn't even know that he had flown into space. And Mother had been staying with them just a month before when their second daughter was born. He said he was going away on a business trip. She said, "Is it far?" And he said, "Yes, it's very far."
Gagarin's family heard the news that their Yuri had successfully entered space, like every other Russian, by sitting glued to the radio. As his ship re-entered the Earth's atmosphere, Gagarin encountered a serious problem. His capsule didn't separate properly from its carrier rocket. It was spinning out of control.
It began to vibrate, and the pressure on him was so strong, it seemed as if he was being pulled in all directions. He told me this had put a terrible strain on him.
Disorientated, Gagarin failed to follow instructions from ground control.
He was told not to eject too early, but he did, and from an undetermined height.
Deep in the countryside, tractor driver Yakov Lysenko was working in the fields when he was astonished to see a figure descending from the sky.
I went out, and I heard an explosion in the air. Then I saw something in the sky. A pilot from a plane, I thought. But he was getting lower and lower, and he landed not far from our village.
A few miles away, two schoolgirls rushed outside to see what was happening.
The boys ran up here first. They saw it. It was a huge ball, about this big in diameter, about 2 or 3 meters high. It fell here, then it bounced and fell again. There was a huge hole where it hit first time.
He was coming towards us. He said, "Boys, let's get to know each other. I'm the first spaceman in the world."
The boys were all over the capsule. They gave us some of those tubes. The lucky ones got chocolate, others got mashed potatoes. I was also tasting it, but we spat it out.
He said, "Boys, stay here. Lots of people will be here any minute now. Cars, bosses will arrive. We'll have our pictures taken together." But of course, when they arrived, they soon forgot about us. They drove him away, and we never saw him again.
By the time Korolev and the other bosses turned up to inspect the capsule, an inflatable boat and a radio had gone missing. The KGB interrogated local villagers.
The KGB said, "They belong to the state. We must have them back." Then someone told them that some of our boys had been working the winter crops over on the hillside. The police visited their homes and put pressure on them. Yes, they said, we did take them. They had to give the boat and the radio back.
The details of Gagarin's landing had to be concealed. The flight could qualify as a world record only if the pilot stayed inside the capsule all the way to touchdown. This had not been the case.
Because the pilot abandoned his flying apparatus before landing, the judicial authorities would have ruled that any such record was not valid.
Gagarin's parachute landing was kept secret in order to qualify. But there was nothing false about the elation felt in Moscow.
It was absolutely spontaneous. Usually, the demonstrations, such demonstrations, were prepared, but this not. It was a natural feeling which come from the heart of maybe 90% of people in the Soviet Union.
Journalists came from everywhere. They were on the doorstep and even trying to climb through the windows. They were calling us from all over the world. Everybody wanted to know about him. Mother spoke to him on the phone that evening and he said that everything was fine. We wouldn't believe it until we saw him, and then everything would be all right. In the evening they sent a car to take us to Moscow.
2 days after his flight, the Soviet Union paid its official thanks to the man who had become its most famous son.
A red carpet was laid out. Yuri came out of the plane and the band began to play. People started to shout hooray.
When I saw him walking down the carpet towards us, I noticed that something was dragging along behind him.
One of his shoelaces was untied.
Любое новое задание нашей партии и правительства. Майор Гагарин.
Khrushchev was more than a head of state to Gagarin. He became his patron and even his friend.
I think that they not only liked, they loved each other. They have in heart that they are similar. They represent such Russians who were against Stalin time, against cruelties. And they represent the time of open society.
At last we got to see him. Our son was coming. He reported to Khrushchev, and only then could we get to greet him. Then we all went to Red Square.
Gagarin and Valentina traveled to the Kremlin alongside Khrushchev at the head of the motorcade. Somewhere at the back was Korolev, the engineering genius who'd made the flight possible.
The most interesting thing was people like Korolev. No one knew him, no one came up to him, and no one congratulated him. When Gagarin came from the airport to the Kremlin, Korolyov was in the 11th or 12th car.
I saw the sea of people. Not a sea, but an avalanche. 6 or more hours they were walking through Red Square. Yuri was standing on the mausoleum. It was astonishing to see him amongst the government members. Only then did I realize the importance of this event.
Yuri Gagarin had become an anomaly within the Soviet system. No single person was supposed to be greater than the collective whole. The people should look at a hero and see themselves reflected. But Gagarin was more than just an emblem. He was the real thing, and, as Khrushchev recognized, of tremendous propaganda value as a result.
The flight of the Soviet rocket Vostok 1 not only opened a new belief in the cosmos, it also showed that we are a peaceful nation and promoted communist ideals to all people of the earth.
Gagarin's famous smile traveled the world, the greatest public relations success the Russians had ever enjoyed. From India to Japan, Egypt to Mexico, Canada to Cuba, Libya to the United Nations, he was mobbed wherever he went.
Will you preside over the Space Pilots Trade Union?
Yes, I'll do it, if you'll vote for me.
He liked it because he represents the Soviet Union. And he represents the new style of relations with the Western countries, first of all. And then the new style of human relations. He represents human being.
Gagarin became an international celebrity. He was a star, but a lonely one, in a society where there were no others to share his glory. It was his family who began to feel the pressures of fame first. Valentina Gagarin had never enjoyed the limelight. Now she looked increasingly ill at ease in her new role as celebrity wife.
Valentina was quite a complicated woman. She protected Gagarin from every kind of temptation which came as a result of his position. She didn't like the endless appearances and trips abroad that they were required to do. Even when she was awarded the Order of Lenin medal by Khrushchev, she never ever wore it.
Soon Valentina had more to concern her than pressures of foreign travel. In the autumn of 1961, Gagarin took his young family on holiday to the Crimean resort of Foros. German Titov, now more friend than rival, came along too. Both drank too much, and on his last day there, Gagarin found himself embroiled in the first of many scandals that were to cloud his private life.
They were due to leave in the morning, and the maid had to shut the building up when they left.
Anna Romantsayeva was a nurse working at the exclusive hotel.
The maid went into a room to wait for them to leave. Yuri, he was drunk, followed her into the room and shut the door behind him.
General Kamanin, head of cosmonaut training, noted the incident in his diary.
Gagarin came into the room, locked the door and tried to kiss her, saying, "What are you going to do? Cry for help?"
Then Valentina came looking for him. When she knocked on the door, the maid answered and told her that Yuri had gone onto the balcony. When they both looked, Yuri was lying down there on the curb. When I rushed to help him, his first question was, "Will I be able to fly into space or to the moon?" I said, "We shall see."
A week later, when Gagarin attended the Communist Party Congress, the injuries to his face were clearly visible. But the truth was soon covered up in favor of an official explanation.
I remember the newspapers reporting that Gagarin had been carrying his baby daughter when he had tripped, and he had sacrificed himself to break the fall so that she wouldn't be hurt.
But when reporting to General Kobanin, Gagarin and Titov were more candid.
They acknowledged their alcohol abuse, thoughtless attitude to women, and other faults. Gagarin presented a relatively truthful story of his wound. However, probably for Valentina's peace of mind, he maintained that he did not know the girl was in the room from which he jumped.
Gagarin and Valentina now had two daughters.
They were his pride and joy. He paid a lot of attention to them. When I was coming from the office, I often saw Yuri, taking them for a walk and talking to them in a very serious way, like adults.
But for Gagarin, the temptations to stray from the upright family life approved by the party were ever present, especially when he was away from home. He often spent the night at the Yusnost Hotel in Moscow.
He had a room allocated to him, 709 on the 7th floor. There was a banquet once. He was drunk and one of the leading sportswomen of the Union, a world champion. He didn't seduce her. She seduced him. She came to his room.
Once again, the ever-vigilant Valentina was on her husband's trail.
Valentina loved Gagarin very much, of course, but because of the things that had happened, she was very jealous. The military police should have warned him that she was on her way up, but they didn't. She caused quite a scene. She tore Gagarin apart. The sportswoman picked up her clothes and ran away. In the morning, Gagarin had to go and see Khrushchev. I did his makeup. I was licking his wounds.
Gagarin's role as a roving ambassador for Khrushchev's communism was no real substitute to working on the space program. Although a party member, he had little interest in formal politics. If he relished his position, it was because it allowed him to respond to the many appeals for help he received from ordinary people. Fyodor Demchuk was Gagarin's personal driver.
I remember one story where a boy was about to be imprisoned for committing a trivial offence. His mother wrote to Yuri asking for help, and he said to me, "I have to help. If he goes to prison, he'll be lost forever. He's only a young lad, so I must save him."
Gagarin received thousands of letters pleading for help.
Here, Yuri Gagarin is asked to help with the plight of a citizen who cannot provide proper care for his mentally handicapped daughter because he is very old and very poor. Or this letter: "I kindly ask you to help with the housing problem of a woman whose present housing is very bad, and she has a small child with a heart problem." Gagarin considered all these requests and pushed the relevant government bodies to help them out.
His closeness to Khrushchev gave Gagarin some influence in the early days of his fame, but his power also earned him enemies.
Some military people on the high level, the generals, had not so good relations with him and because they had a very big jealousies, that he was too close to Khrushchev and became so great influence in the world.
In 1964, Gagarin's world fell apart. Khrushchev was deposed in a bloodless coup and replaced by Leonid Brezhnev. Gagarin was out in the cold.
Gagarin lost his status and his position. He didn't travel after this a lot as before. He didn't became a high position in the army. They didn't give him something. He did not know what to do. He lost such feeling that he is still important.
On one occasion, Gagarin contacted a member of Brezhnev's government to complain about the treatment of one of his colleagues. He was told, "You are a hero. Go and ponder on heroic things and leave the rest to us."
I see the cause of his tragedy was that his personality was becoming split. He felt on one side the lack of rights of the lower classes and their hardships, and he saw the corruption in the top layers of our society. He suffered a great deal because of that.
Sometimes when he came out of the Kremlin, he'd look very sad. He'd just sit quietly in the car. I wouldn't need to ask what had happened.
With no prospect of another space flight, Gagarin began to decline, as General Komanin noted in his diary.
His stormy life, never-ending meetings involving drinking was clearly changing him. Slowly but surely, these factors were wiping the charming smile from his face.
Yet it was Komanin who was to offer Gagarin a way out.
I decided to prepare him for a flight on the Soyuz spaceship. Gagarin prepared energetically. He was apparently changing for the better. His weight dropped, he took up sports and began to study new space techniques.
Gagarin was backup pilot to Vladimir Komarov. Tradition dictated that if he wasn't required for this flight, the next flight would automatically be given to him.
During the landing, a tragedy happened to Komarov. The main parachute didn't open, which caused an impact with the Earth. He died. This could have been Yuri Gagarin.
Komarov was given a grand state funeral, but some of the politicians attending as mourners bore direct responsibility for his death. Technicians discovered a multitude of faults in the rocket. When their bosses refused to take notice, Gagarin organized the technicians to compile a list of the problems and sent it through KGB channels to Brezhnev. The letter vanished.
Komarov's wife said to him, "Don't fly." And he answered, "I must. I cannot refuse, or Yuri Gagarin, the first cosmonaut, will have to go, and he will die." At that moment, Komarov cracked. Maybe he just let out all the tension, and he began to cry.
Gagarin knew he was Komarov's last hope. He made frantic requests for a meeting with Brezhnev.
I warned Yuri if he was going to speak to Brezhnev to speak to me first. Whatever he did say, he must be careful.
When the meeting was refused, Gagarin tried one last desperate attempt to save his friend.
Gagarin began demanding that he too be put in a protective suit, in a spacesuit. It was already clear that Komarov would fly, and there were only 3 or 4 hours left. But he suddenly burst out and started demanding this, this, and this.
For 2 hours, Komarov circled the Earth, knowing that on re-entry he would die. His wife was brought to mission control to say goodbye. As his capsule plunged towards the ground, he screamed at the controllers, "You have killed me." It was a stark demonstration of Gagarin's impotence. He could no longer help a comrade in the hour of his most pressing need. Now, in a final blow to his self-esteem, he was told he would never fly again. His value was as a piece of living history, not as a working cosmonaut.
They were saying that he's the first cosmonaut. He should stay on land. That's it. Regarding space, he said, "I'm a pilot and I must fly."
Finally, he accepted a job as deputy head of cosmonaut training.
He was offered higher jobs, but he said, "I want to work directly in the space program. I don't want to work anywhere else."
Even this failed to give Gagarin a sense of purpose. For the first time in his life, he began to lose the respect and goodwill of those around him.
Towards the end of his life, you heard some of the cosmonauts say, "So what about Gagarin? He only flew around the Earth once. He didn't have to do anything. He just sat there and watched the automatic systems do all the work."
Denied access to spaceships, Gagarin returned to his first love, aeroplanes. In the previous 9 years, he'd completed only 75 hours flying. A pilot's average should have been at least 1,500 hours. To get airborne again, the first man in space needed a refresher course. It was March the 27th, 1968. His instructor was wartime fighter ace Vladimir Surugin.
He went to bed at 10. I asked him, "Why are you going to bed so early?" And he said, "Tomorrow I will have to test Yura. I have to be in good shape." He woke up in the morning, sung his favorite songs, an aria. He actually liked arias, operas very much. He left for work in such a good mood. But then a tragedy occurred.
On the first day, in the evening, we found traces of Vladimir Surugin, pieces of his light overcoat, pieces of cloth. And on the next day, whilst we were getting deeper into this crater, we found pieces of Yuri Gagarin's leather jacket. And then it became clear, they are both here.
For 30 years, the fragments of Gagarin's plane have been sealed in steel barrels within a vault at a location just outside Moscow. But the contents of the barrels will remain hidden, ensuring that the full story of Gagarin's last hours will never be known. Even now, the air traffic controller in charge of Gagarin's flight that day is unsure at what moment he died.
We just can't understand what happened with this plane. The investigation said they crashed after 31 minutes in the air. I don't believe this because I had contact with him for another 10 minutes after that.
So what did happen? Alexei Leonov is convinced he knows the truth.
There was another plane in the area. It was a Su-11 supersonic jet fighter, and it should have been flying much higher, at 10,000 meters. This plane created a situation which caused them to go into a spin.
The KGB investigation left no room for doubt.
The evidence was clear. There was no conspiracy, no hostile actions, and no deliberate sabotage, even from abroad.
But when Leonov looked back into the files on the accident, what he found surprised him.
20 years later, I asked for some of my documents as a member of the investigating commission, and I did not recognize my own handwriting. Somebody had rewritten my documents.
It's clear that some people were adjusting the facts in order to protect their own positions.
30 years after his death, it now seems likely that concealment of error, rather than political conspiracy, best explains the blurring of the facts of Gagarin's last flight. Nobody, it seemed, wanted to carry the can for the death of the Soviet Union's first cosmonaut. He had human weaknesses, but to the thousands who filed past his coffin, he was a genuine hero whose bravery and enthusiasm were proof of the resilience of human endeavor. Today, as cosmonauts ascend into the heavens to join their American counterparts aboard a space station, Gagarin's legacy is clear.
30 seconds.
Neil Armstrong said that it was Yuri Gagarin who called on all of us to follow the stars.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
No one more than Gagarin would have wanted to make that journey.
If I'm called upon to return to space, I'm ready.